Namaste and welcome to the second of the series of the Dashavatara. Now primarily this story focuses on only one incarnation of Lord Vishnu, which is the Kurma Avatar or the turtle incarnation. But as we move ahead with the story, we get to know that there is another image or roop that Lord Vishnu embodies. We would get to that later, but as of now, I hope that this little suspense hooks you to the video even more. So now, we begin. Manthan charan dharan hetu devasur paripalan bho kurmakar sharir namo hari bhaktam te paripalayama, which translates to that Lord Vishnu himself took the form of a giant turtle to be able to support the great Mandar Parvata shell so that he could aid in the Devas Sagram of Samudra Manthan and uphold righteousness and ensure the smooth functioning of the entire world. Thus, we bow down to the Lord. Now, before beginning with the actual story, it is necessary that we know about certain subtle distinctions that were made amongst the inhabitants of the universe back then. The norm that states the philosophy of the human order is known as the Vedas, which were perhaps whispers of the god or insights of the wise that gave this world a meaning and life a purpose. Those who heard them first and imbibed them came to be known as the Rishis. Those who cherished them and had a vision to abide by them came to be known as the Devas. And those who couldn't as closely relate to them came to be known as the Asuras. These chants revealed Vedana, or the yearning of the restless human soul, and thus collectively came to be known as the Vedas. And so, high above in the skies lay Amravati, the abode of the Devas, wherein Indra, the lord of the Devas, was so engrossed in his comfort and luxuries that he overlooked that one of the most learned of the Rishis, Rishi Durvasa, had visited the Swarga. Having witnessed as to how Indra's pride and neglect had assumed the notion of disrespect, that he refused to even acknowledge Rishi Durvasa, he was enraged and he cursed the entire Devlok that each one of the Devas would soon lose all of their powers. They would lose their Shri or Mangalya that signifies Lakshmi, and therefore Goddess Lakshmi, who is known as the embodiment of fortune, wealth and power, got caught in the depths of the Shir Sagara, the ocean of milk. Devastated, the Devas went to Lord Vishnu, who was resting beneath Sheshnag in peace. As soon as Lord Vishnu got to know of this, he advised the Devas to churn the enormous ocean of milk to recover Lakshmi, as well as to get hold of the pot of the Amrit. The Amrit, the nectar of immortality, that would help them get back all of their powers as well as grant them immortality. For the gods of air, water, fire and earth, respectively, Vayu Dev, Varun Dev, Bhudevi and Agni Dev, had to be ever living. Only this could ensure the smooth functioning of the world 24/7. But however, initially, Narayana was reluctant to help the Devas, since he thought that their negligence and privilege was worthy of this curse. But however, the mere thought of the world being bereft of fortune, that is Lakshmi, moved him to give in, because a world without fortune is indeed unfortunate. But it was noted that the Devas did not have as much power to be able to churn the entire ocean of milk by themselves. And so, the Asuras were invited to join them. and they who promised their share of benediction with respect to whatever the manthan eats. For the Prakriti does not ever polarize the good and the bad. It is Sanskriti, or the man-made civilization, that does so. Prakriti gives everybody an equal chance, but however, severely punishes those who does not abide by the simple law, that is, to use their power in the service of the mankind and not for their own selfish deeds. But however, Lord Vishnu did wish that the pot of Amrit rised from the side of the Devas, because it was made very clear that the Amrit would belong to only those on whose side it appears. And the reason for this was that Lord Vishnu was apprehensive that if the pot of Amrit went into the hands of some of the ill-minded asuras, then it would be misused to create entrenched havoc in the world. And further, there would be no supervision on its use, since the abode of the asuras is Patal, which is under the supervision of Shukracharya, who had personal enmity towards Narayan. And further, he wanted the fortunes of the Amrit to be able to be available to the entire mankind, so that the mankind would be enriched with it. And if any Deva did misuse it, they could always be checked upon by the Tridev. But however, Narayan could never express it, since it was a fair game. Therefore, it is necessary to note that it cannot be concluded that the Devas are good and the Asuras are bad, since it is subjective to the individual and their power management. And so the goal of the manthan was laid and the apparatus set up. Mount Mandar served as the churning rod, while Nag Vasuki, the king of the serpents, served as the churning rod. His head went to the Asuras and the tail went to the Devas. And thus began the Samudra Manthan. Both the sides cooperated to instill coordination so that they could collectively reap the benefits of their toil. But halfway through the journey, it became impossible to pull anymore, because the Mount Mandar began to sink. How could now the process be continued? And that is when the preserver of the world, Lord Vishnu, came to the rescue. He assumed the image of the group of the giant turtle, Kurma, and rest the entire Mandar Parvat on its large shell, keeping it afloat. It must have been incredibly difficult for Lord Vishnu to be able to bear the weight of that giant mountain throughout, but his patience arose from the hope that this little yearning of his, or this little toil of his, could get the entire mankind the fortunes of the Amrit. The vision of good helped him and stirred him to persist and sustain the way. And in no time, the first outcome of the journey was there. But what was it? It was the deadly poison, halal, that threatened to destroy the entire world. And that is when the destroyer of the world himself came to neutralize its effect. Lord Shiva took the halal in his hands and drank it. And this gave his throat a blue color, thus bestowing him with the name Neelakanta. All the other emergings from the manthan were justly divided between the Devas as well as the Asuras. All the things that came out were a resemblance to the three guides of material life on earth, that is Dharma, Artha and Kama. Some of the examples of the outcomes were Shri herself, or Lakshmi, Airavat, the king of elephants, Uchchashrevas, the seven-headed horse, Kaustubha, the precious jewel, Kamdhenu or Surbi, the wealthy cow, the Urvashis, Varuni, and the romantic god Chandra, and much more. And finally, the Devas and the Asuras were tired of churning and they almost gave up, thinking that the Amrit would never come out. That is when Dhanvantri, the god of physicians, arose with the pot of Amrit from the Devas' side. Indeed, it belonged to the Devas. Some of the Asuras felt cheated, and that is when they employed Rahu, the god of Neptune, who was indeed a Deva, but he was never treated as one because of his demonic deeds. They employed Rahu to quietly steal the pot of Amrit when the Devas were busy rejoicing in their victory. And that is what Rahu did. But when Narayana got to know of this, he was enraged. And he saw that this little act could impair the smooth functioning of the entire world. And being the preserver of the world, he was alarmed. And that is when he took one of his most beautiful of roops or images. He appeared in the form of Mohini, the enchantress, and hypnotized all the asuras with her divine grace. And when the asuras lay intoxicated and unconscious, she cleverly took the pot of Amrit and ran away. But there was one being who did not participate in this because he was eavesdropping the entire scenario from outside. And that was Rahu. As soon as he got to know that Mohini was none other than Narayan, he disguised himself as a Deva and awaited his turn when Mohini was distributing the Amrit to all the Devas. And as soon as she poured the Amrit down Rahu's throat, she realized that this being was not a Deva. Vishnu took his original form and beheaded Rahu with his Sudarshan Chakra. But by then, the Amrit had already reached his throat. So his head came to exist independently as Rahu and his body as Ketu. The Amrit was restored to the Devas on the condition that these powers would be used in the service of the mankind and never for their own selfish acts. While some of the asuras, who were very deserving of this power of immortality, couldn't cherish it just because they could not mend the ways of their own companions or never were brave enough to stand up for the right. Lord Vishnu has been imagined to be quoted saying that युद्ध अथवा संग्राम प्रतिशोध के लिए नहीं होता, वो तो होता है अधर्म की आशंका से मुक्त हो न्याय की स्थापना के लिए. न्याय or justice signifies nothing but a righteous functioning of the world. And this marks the end of the beautiful day, and we now begin to join all the dots to see what morals it preaches us in the current times. युद्ध न्याय के लिए होता है. A war is for justice to prevail. These current times are no different. It might seem like turmoil or a war, but then the only vision behind every war is for justice to prevail. And that can only be possible if all of us undergo change, if all of us undergo growth. And even though it might be incredibly difficult for us to sustain with hope and courage, but as human beings, all that we can do is try to do so in these times, having the vision for our Amrit. Because the Amrit for us may not be the nectar of immortality, but could be a better world with better people and righteous mindsets. But for us to reach our Amrit, we have to persist and sustain the weight of these difficult times, just like the Kurma, with the hope that this too is temporary and this too shall pass. We have to cooperate and help each other to get through this together. For journey is not like a tug of war. There is not force on both the sides. In Manthan, if one side pulls, the other has to loosen its hold. And this establishes the principle of collaboration. Now, we get to one of the most important of the learnings that, according to me, is something that all of us should know. Is something that I have realized only lately, and I would be eternally grateful if even 0.5% of this could help anybody who's watching this video to lead a more peaceful life than yesterday. And that is that, interestingly, this cooperation doesn't always have to be with others. It could also be with our own selves and with our own emotions. Because this churning or manthan is a metaphor for change, for healing. Healing that leads to change. Because nothing is permanent except change. So today there might be a lot of sorrow, a lot of negativity. But someday in the near future, there might not be any. So let's realize today that if today we upset or sad, it is okay to feel so. Let's realize today that if today we have been unproductive and disappointed and sad with our own selves and everybody around us, it is okay to be so. Let's realize today that if today we want to shut ourselves off the world, be alone with our own selves, cry or even shout, it is okay to do so. Because there will be a time when we will feel that all of this helped us to overcome a phase that was extremely challenging. But if we resist this manthan or this cooperation with our own emotion, then all the possibilities that lead to our growth would be buried in the depths of our being, just like all the fortunes that were buried in the depths of the Sagar. But if we free ourselves of these piled up emotions, if we free ourselves of this poison of forcefully repressed emotions, then we make way for all the possibilities of our growth to shine. Just how after the halahal or the poison was freed from the manthan, all the other fortunes began to come up and rise up steadily and slowly. Now, no matter how hard the Devas or the Asuras would have tried, unless and until this halahal came out and was managed with, there was no way the other fortunes could be brought up. Similarly, if today we are feeling negative and not alright, then no matter how hard we try to push in positive thoughts, positive essences or motivation, it would not work out. Because anything pushed forcefully into not a very right state of the mind is nothing but toxic positivity. And in these current times, positivity is nothing but a sheer privilege. A privilege that if we can have even 1% of taste, then we should be thankful and grateful. So healing is subjective to the individual and is never linear. But it usually has two steps. The first, releasing our current emotions and embracing them the way they are, no matter positive or negative. Because we in our own selves are our own Devas as well as our own Asuras. And remember when I said that it cannot be concluded that all the Asuras are bad? Because some of them might be negative, but they could be dealt with for the better. And the second step is allowing the mind to bounce back to its own pace and rhythm in its own time. Because maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, maybe not even day after tomorrow, but someday in the near future, our minds will get tired of surfacing just through negativity. And that is when it will tilt automatically to the positive side. But it will do so in its own time. Because the opposite of happiness is not wrong or abnormal. All that we are feeling today is extremely valid. If you are watching this video right now and you feel that all that I am speaking and dancing to is not making sense to you, give yourself that space and time to be back mentally where you were before this turmoil began. And believe me, someday it would make sense. The only difference is that I cannot predict that day for you. But that day would come, it's the universe's promise. Because this pain is a part of the process of the healing. This pain of churning, sustaining, and cooperating with our own emotions and managing this halahal or this poison of piled up emotions is the only way to our Amrit or our growth. Unless and until we embrace this halahal, there is no way we could embrace our Amrit. And once we do so, it would surely leave a mark on us, a mark of change, a mark of growth. Just like Lord Shiva has had a blue throat ever since. So sometimes when we are sitting alone and somebody comes and tells us to be all happy and chirpy, let's realize that they are not preaching positivity, they are preaching denial, which is hiding away from our own emotions. But instead, we all should be proud that we have been true to our emotions without any disguise, have had the courage to accept them as well work through them. Because we are human beings, we have a heart and we have emotions. And it is just as natural for us to traverse through the darkness as well as through light. But the universe promises that there will be one day where all of us would be genuinely happy. Where all of this struggle might seem worth it and a lot more easy. And that day, we would be proud that we could make it. Lastly, let's not be a Rahu and try to cheat our own selves and our emotions by trying to get hold of the Amrit or the growth by avoiding this gradual process of manthan and cooperation. Let's instead believe that we could be the enchantress, Mohini, and get out of this as gracefully as possible. Because the manthan is still on, and so is the change. The only thing we can do right now is go with the flow. Realize that it's okay to feel however we want to, and persist and sustain like the Kurma, with the hope that all of this too is temporary. Because at the end, destiny plays its part and decides who is to stay and who is to go. But all those who do stay back, like ourselves, have enormous capability to be of service to humankind. So in our own little capacity, let's keep helping. Let's keep trying to make a change. Let's keep being thankful that we can live a happy and a healthy life. And most importantly, let's keep cooperating with our own emotions. Because the manthan is still on. And so is the hope that the Amrit will come up. It may take a little time, but it will